Thank you. All right. Well, welcome to the mansion. We are so excited to have you here for this special live audience event with our very, very special guest. Tonight's guest is who I consider probably the most brilliant man alive, and also the smartest man alive, and the most kindest man alive. If those are even phrases, we'll take it. We'll take it. So he is the 2008 Presidential Medal of Honor winner. He has been bestowed 60 honorary doctorates. For 30 years, he served as the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at the Johns Hopkins Children's Center. He is the author of 8 New York Times bestselling books, the foremost of which is his autobiography, Gifted Hands, which was subsequently turned into a movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. starring him. This is a man that we have an immense amount of respect for. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome my friend and yours, former United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Ben Carson.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here tonight. And, you know, we're going to be discussing some very, very important things. But before we get started, I thought I'd just mention some of the things that have been on my mind most recently. You know, last November, after the election, I decided I would retire. Now, I had failed in my attempt to retire previously. So I said, this time I'm going to be able to do it. But about 3 weeks later, I saw a lot of things starting to happen which concerned me greatly about what was going to happen to our nation. And I said I wouldn't be able to have any fun on the golf course seeing all that stuff going on. So several members of my tremendous staff at HUD and I got together and created the American Cornerstone Institute, looking at the actual cornerstone principles that allowed us to go from a bunch of ragtag militiamen to the premier nation in the world. And those things were our faith, liberty, community, and life. Those principles. Now you'll notice that those are all things that we seem to be pushing back against these days. You know, faith is frequently ridiculed, and yet, when you think about it, isn't it our Judeo-Christian values that teach us how to relate to each other? Love your neighbor. Pray for those who despitefully use you. It doesn't say cancel your neighbor if you disagree with them. Hate people who don't agree with your agenda. And so you can see how rapidly we're moving in the wrong direction as we undermine those kinds of principles. And then also the principle of liberty. How important is liberty? Well, this was the destination for people from around the globe who were seeking liberty. They wanted freedom to live the life they wanted to live. They didn't want to be serfs working for somebody else all their lives. And now there are even challenges to that. There are challenges to some of our fundamental rights, like freedom of speech. Now, if you think about it, not too many years ago, one of the things that was characteristic of America is that you could say anything you wanted. It didn't affect your job. It didn't affect anything. Now, hardly anyone, particularly in public, doesn't carefully monitor what they say because they don't want to be penalized. They don't want to be canceled. This is America, and we're allowing that to happen. And if we allow that to happen, it really is only the beginning. Now, some people say it's not a problem because the government isn't imposing a restriction on our speech. Well, guess what? The effect is the same, whether it's the government, Facebook, Twitter, with the complicity of the government, the effect is exactly the same. And it's so essential that we, the American people, understand that. Otherwise, we allow those freedoms to very gradually erode. And then the whole concept of community, of working together. Isn't that how we grew so quickly? Because we had so many people in the little communities all over the place with different talents and skills, but they were able to amalgamate those and to work together to achieve the common goal. And, if somebody got hurt and they couldn't work, everybody else pitched in and helped out their family. That was the American way. And as we've become coarser in our relationships, you see less of that. And that's not good. And then we've also gotten to a place where if the person who lives across the street from you for the last 20 years, peacefully, has a different yard sign, now they're your enemy. Because we've allowed big tech and the media to convince us that somebody who has a different thought than yours is your enemy. Now, when you begin to implant those kinds of seeds, you are implanting the seeds of a society that is totalitarian. And all you have to do is look back through history at how these things began. If you talk to people who came here from Cuba and Venezuela, they'll tell you this is deja vu. We've seen this before. This is the way it starts. And the real question becomes, are we smart enough and brave enough to stop it? Because there are a lot of people who would much prefer to stand quietly in the corner with their head down and hope that nobody calls them a racist or some other name than to speak up. And that's what the left depends on. People being silenced by pressure so that they can just continue to carry on their agendas. And I actually believe that they probably would be successful, except one thing. Well, two things, really. One thing is there's God. And if he was willing to save Sodom and Gomorrah for 10 people, I think we're good. But the other thing is, we were just slowly migrating into socialism and communism. Just gradual, bit by bit. But now, I think the left has turned the heat up too high. It's like the frog in the saucepan. The frog's going to jump out. And you see it happening now with all these parent groups who are challenging what's being taught in the schools, because they didn't really know what was being taught in the schools before. And having a chance to see that, can you imagine these little children, innocent little children? First of all, they got to wear a mask. They can't see people's facial expressions at a time when they're learning to correlate facial expressions with what's being said. That's a substantial social disadvantage for developing children. And then they're told they may be carrying some deadly disease. And even though they may not be sick, they can give it to their grandmother. Well, the unfortunate thing is grandmothers do get old and die. Now you got this kid thinking that they had something to do with that and feeling guilty. Think about that. And then they're told that they're a racist. And they've been a racist since they were 3 months old. And their father's a racist, and their grandfather and all their ancestors caused every problem. And if they're a minority, then they're hopelessly oppressed people. All of this while you're trying to develop your self-image. It's child abuse. And if that's not bad enough, you may not be a girl or a boy. You know, I mean, it's like collectively as a society, we've lost our minds. Completely gone off the deep end. You know, I hope it's just a phase, but I fear it's not just a phase unless people become active. People have to develop community groups, church groups, all kinds of groups. They have to begin to talk about what is going on in our country. We have to be able to give the kids the real history. You know, at American Cornerstone, we have a new program rolling out called Little Patriots, in which we teach our young people the real history of our country, warts and all. We don't try to hide any warts. You know, our country was inhabited by human beings, and human beings have warts. You know, that's why we need a savior. But, you know, we don't need to distort it, make it seem like because we had slavery, somehow we are uniquely evil. Slavery has been present since there have been societies in the world. There are more slaves today than there were in 1863 when the Emancipation Proclamation was put forth, particularly human trafficking, sex slavery. It is abundant today. Hardly anybody talks about it, and yet here it is in our midst. And if there was something that was unique about America and slavery, is that there were so many people here who abhorred the institution that they were willing to fight a civil war and lose a substantial portion of our population to get rid of that evil. And that's what our kids need to understand. And if we are persistent, if we're willing to talk about it, if we are courageous, if we are brave, we will win that fight. Remembering that you can't be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave. As soon as you chicken out, you start losing. And then the fourth pillar, life. Such an important concept. From the womb to the tomb. To be concerned about life, the value of human life. Every human life is important. Jesus Christ died for every human life. And to try to create a situation where one life is more important than the other is not something that should be part of what we do. And we sit around and we criticize many of the ancient civilizations for child sacrifice. Are we any better? We've killed 60 million babies. And all you have to do is look at what is in that mother's womb. You know, by 9 weeks, that baby's moving around. It's got a nose and 2 eyes and a mouth and little fingers and toes. And you know what's really sad is if you've ever seen an abortion, and when they stick that suction device in the womb, you see the baby trying to get away from it. before it pulls off its arms and legs. And it is just awful. It's barbaric. How can we do that? And how can you say that's not a living individual? It becomes a living, unique individual when the male and the female gametes meet together and become 23 pairs of unique chromosomes with that zygote that is formed. It's not the mother, it's not the father. It is a unique individual at that point with rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We need to remember that about our founding document. Those are rights that are given to us not by government, but by God. Thank you.